latest episode of the Dram Show with Chris Goodrum. Okay, so today is World Whisky Day, so obviously it's one had to make an episode of the show on World Whisky Day. It had to be done, I think, and it's an interesting thing with regards to sort of getting hold of samples for the episodes of the show is that I contact quite a number of distilleries and companies, and sometimes I get completely ignored, no reply whatsoever. Sometimes I get a no, and you think, well, okay, at least you could be bothered to reply, even if it was in the negative. And then you have distilleries like Springbank, who are more than happy to send out samples and are incredibly generous in doing so. I'm guessing Grant at Springbank, whenever he sends out an email saying these are the new releases, is pretty much expecting the usual reply, shall we say, and comes up trumps pretty much most of the time. Sometimes they'll probably say, no, we don't have anything open, I can't send anything of some of the older stuff, but of recent, one has received pretty much the entire works, which is incredibly generous, and obviously without the support of distilleries and people like Grant, I wouldn't have a show to do to entertain you guys. So yes, so today Springbank. I don't really need to waffle about the distillery. I've done, I think, about 3 maybe episodes before, and no apologies for doing so. They release some bloody good whiskey, and as you know, it's certainly one of my favourite distilleries. So the interesting thing about today's tasting is we're looking at the 3 different spirits that or the 3 different ranges that Springbank do. All are relatively, pretty much recent. Some have only just pretty much come out a month or so back. So this is very up to date and on point, as they say. So without further ado, let's have a look at today's lineup. Fighting for the sunshine. Right, okay, so first we're going to kick off with the Hazelburn, which is the triple distilled spirit produced by Springbank. We're going to look at last year's cask finish bottling. This is the 9-year-old Barolo finish, bottled at 47.9%. It spent 6 years of its life in ex-American oak and a further 3 years finishing in ex-Springbank Barolo casks, obviously refilled Barolo. And the thing about Barolo and sometimes wine casks in general, you can get this quite sort of butyric character from fresh wine casks, and some people like it, some people don't. It's just one of those interesting little quirks, shall we say. So it'll be interesting to see how using refilled casks, and as you can see from the colour, it obviously in the original use of the barrels leached out pretty much all of the wine colouring, so it could give us a clue to how subtle the wine influences actually on the spirit itself, but we shall see when we get there. The second Hazelburn bottling we'll be looking at is the very new 13-year-old. This has been aged entirely in Oloroso sherry casks and bottled at 47.1%. Now, one of the things I love about Hazelburn is that although it's triple distilled, it has loads and loads of character and depth, and certainly aged in sherry, it's more than a match for, say, something like the Auchentoshan 12-year-old, which I tend to find is just all about the sherry. So it'll be interesting to see whether the spirit indeed stands up to the Oloroso. So that will be an interesting one. And then we're going to go on to 2 very nice Springbank bottlings. The first one is this year's 21-year-old, bottled at 46%. This is an interesting and rather nice whiskey, it has to be said, as I've already tasted it. Selection of casks. It's been created from casks bourbon, sherry, port, and rum. So you think, my God, that could be a bit of a mishmash. But as we know from sort of other whiskies such as Cavalan, for example, who use a multitude of different wine casks, it can actually work. And so let's hope that this venerable spirit hasn't succumbed to OTT of casks, shall we say, but we shall get there eventually. And then we shall be looking at Springbank 25. Now, this was earlier 2017 release, bottled at 46%. This particular 25 was a selection of ex-bourbon and sherry casks, which were married together in refill port. So again, not a huge porty kind of colour, so we're expecting subtle kind of porty notes, which should be interesting, because I mean, you know, old Springbank, 25-year-old Springbank is just absolutely stunning, and the last thing you'd want to do is just kind of swamp that with wine. So it pretty much, I would imagine, goes without saying that this is going to be really, really well balanced. And then we're going to get on to the peated malt. I mean, obviously, there's a little bit of peat, obviously, in Springbank, and there's no peat in the Hazelburn. But the Longrow is obviously their peated malt. The first bottling we'll be looking at is the brand new release of the 18-year-old. I love the 18-year-old Longrow. I love old Longrow. I just love the kind of the sort of subtle dustiness of the peat, and sometimes a slight violety note as well, which I think is always absolutely gorgeous. This year's release is quite interesting in that it's been aged in both sherry and American oak, 60% refill sherry casks and 40% fresh bourbon, or first fill bourbon, as the case may be. And finally, we'll be looking at the brand new Longrow 13-year-old Malbec finish. Everybody seems to go crazy for the Longrow wood finishes. I mean, certainly the last red that was done sold out practically just like that, and this bottling has been no exception. I think I managed to get hold of a couple of cases, and there ain't any left now. So the red has been aged for 12 years in ex-bourbon casks, with a 15-month finishing in ex-Malbec casks. So if the old 12-year-old was anything to go by, this should be really sensational and a great finish. So anyway, let's make a start with the Hazelburn. Just on this end, shall we? Quite floral in actual fact. I'm getting sort of honeysuckle sort of notes kind of coming off, but it's got that lovely barley depth to it. There's a little bit of spice, a little hint of the Barolo cask with that sort of slightly spicy red fruit. As expected, it's certainly no butricity, it's no big, huge wininess. It's all very, very subtle, and it allows that sort of robust, triple distilled, barleyed, floral character of Hazelburn to come out. This is an absolutely lovely nose, delightful, really well balanced. Getting quite salty now, as you would expect. The Campbelltown salt's coming out. Almost a kind of minerally saltiness, which I think is quite interesting. Yeah, some lovely spice notes. Yeah, this is just fabulously balanced, really well balanced. Bit of earthiness as well, bit of almost kind of dunnage, but not quite. It's, yeah, more earth than dunnage, I think. Anyway, but let's see what the palate gives us then, shall we? Well, that's quite alcoholic. Oh, you can get that on the finish. So yes, opens up with that sort of lovely kind of robust barley, slight apricot note, and a touch of salt, and then as it gets into the mid palate, then the sort of slight coffeed, winey notes kind of come through. Little bit of almost black fruit. possibly a bit red fruit maybe, some lovely spices, a bit of cocoa powder, chocolate, dry tannins, but that certainly needs a little drop of water. So we shall give it a little drop and see what happens to the nose. Let's see what the water does. A little bit oilier now. It's got less of the floral kind of notes. It's more kind of oily barley, possibly a little less expressive, but certainly really deep. Even a little violety note. Well, it might be my imagination, but it certainly seems to sort of, maybe that's the wine mutating into that kind of note. Anyway, let's see what the palate gives. Wow, that's better. Lovely barley note just carrying on through. A little bit of almost unsweetened honey as well. Juicy, touch of red fruits, a little bit of spice on the finish. Wonderfully mouth-filling and full. That is an absolutely gorgeous whiskey. Really nice. Maybe it's time to forgive us. So let's move on to the 13-year-old. Let's see what those was on this end. Fishier. Yeah, it's got that sort of distinct kind of cod liver oil kind of note that I often pick up in Springbank, or the Springbank spirits, I should say. There is spirit character there. It's not completely swamped by the sherry. The sherry is definitely quite prominent in that kind of gritty, tannic Springbank kind of manner. But it's really oily, and there's some lovely robust, not quite so floral fruit, more earthiness. There's even a little bit of almost kind of peatiness, and I'm wondering whether that's kind of really coming from the cask, because as far as I'm aware, the spirit isn't peated. So it's possible that this could have been first run of, after a Springbank run, so it's probably picked up a little bit of peat possibly, but either way it's just again really well balanced. Let's see what the palate gives us then, shall we? A lot more heavier on the sherry, in that really gritty, coffeed, tannic kind of character. Wonderfully spicy, really nice spicy kind of finish. There's a little bit of raisinated fruit, a little bit of treacle, touch of tar. Again, I'm picking up just a little bit of peat, which wouldn't have expected. Lovely kind of dark chocolate note coming through on the finish. Vibrant, intense, salty, really salty aftertaste, it has to be said. Just classic. I mean, it's got a really treacly, malty kind of character, and it just does not feel like a triple distilled spirit. Like I said, it's got so much body for a triple distilled spirit. It's really, really impressive, and I think if you like sort of Ockentoshen, then I really think that we should give Hazelburn a go, because that is pretty good. Moving on to the 21-year-old Springbank. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Oh, that's lovely. Robust, dusty, American oak. There's a touch of slightly tarry Oloroso. A little bit of wininess from the port as well. but the balance is just really, really spot on, it has to be said. It's got that lovely aged tobacco, leather kind of character, some earth, a little bit of peat. But that peat is just wonderfully dusty. Almost a violety note. No, there is a Parma violet note. Yeah, there's definitely a Parma violet note kind of coming through now. Just give it a bit of time, a bit of aeration. Stunning depth. It really is stunningly deep. I must admit, I'm not getting a great deal from the rum. I mean, I would have expected some maybe demerary sugary notes or dried fruit, but the dried fruit is more from the Oloroso, it has to be said. So I'm definitely getting the sort of dry Oloroso and the tannic sherry notes, the dusty American oak, a little bit of wininess. But either way, I mean, that is just a stunning nose. So well balanced. I mean, admittedly, you know, I must admit, I kind of love the old days of sort of predominantly American oak, with maybe, you know, a bit of sherry in the 21, but yeah, it's just absolutely fantastic. Time to taste it. That is majestic. Opens up with the Oloroso sherry notes, the sort of raisinated fruits, the tannin, almost armagnac-y like dried pruny fruits, walnuts, a little bit of raisin, and then the American oak comes through with that sort of dusty, sawdusty kind of character. And right on the finish, I'm getting that little bit of sort of porty, winey fruit. Again, lovely maturity, sort of tobacco, leather, that kind of thing. Earth, a touch of peat, a little bit of fishiness. Really peppery aftertaste, in actual fact. That is again just absolutely superbly balanced. It's got the maturity. It's got the not softness, because Springbank is never particularly soft. It's got that rough kind of edge to it, which is one of the things I really love. I mean, it's certainly, you could not say Springbank doesn't have character. I mean, this just has character by the absolute bucketful, it has to be said. And it is stunning. Yes, it's not cheap. It's £200 a bottle, which is probably a bit, well, I don't know, it's back par for the course now for a sort of like, you know, 21-year-old whiskey. But either way, that is stunningly good. Going down through the moving on to the 25-year-old now. Obviously even more expensive. I think this is what, $3.99, something like that. So between two, there's almost £600 worth of whiskey just well, not in actual volume, but you know what I mean. Anyway, let's stick one's nose in the glass. A lot more saltier in actual fact. Really fresh and crisp. Getting that kind of like manure-y kind of note, sort of manure-y sort of peat note. Loads and loads of dusty American oak. The sherry is just really sort of sat in the background. There's a little bit of tannin, but not a huge amount. It's predominantly the American oak that seems to be kind of coming through on the nose. There's a little bit of kind of chocolatey wininess right in the background. But oh, this is just a fantastic nose. A little bit of violets. Just absolutely stunning. Really, really nice. Again, loads and loads of character. It's got that sort of kind of roughish kind of edge to it, but polished as well. Really impressive, really stunning depth. See what the palate gives. Smoothness on the finish for a Springbank. I mean, yes, there's still that sort of grittiness there, but really soft. Kind of opens up more with the port notes in actual fact. I'm getting that kind of chocolatey, slightly black fruit, cherries, and then a bit of sort of gritty Oloroso, a little bit of mature American oak, touch of fishiness, loads of spice on the aftertaste, spice, salt, really tingling, fresh kind of finish. I mean, yeah, that is just stunningly good. Like I said, it's got that lovely kind of softness, but it's also got a bit of a rougher element to it. It's kind of, you know, again, just the word that springs to mind is character. It just has so much character, it's untrue. And I love this stuff. I mean, I love Springbank. And interestingly enough, the 10-year-old seems to be getting better and better. Every time I taste the 10-year-old, I mean, I remember going back 10 years or so ago, probably even longer, I always thought the Springbank 10 was a bit, yeah, wasn't quite sure. I mean, what was it that Jim Murray called it one time, Bambi on ice? And it did, but it's just got better and better over the years, and it's got to the point now where distilleries actually run out of stock. I mean, can you believe that? You know, the sort of bog standard 10-year-old, which you would have thought they would have absolutely loads of, they ain't got none. There's no more available until what? End of the year, August, September time. It's just incredible. I mean, so many people just love Springbank now, and you know, it's almost like kind of preaching to the converted these days. And the 10-year-old has just gone from sort of you know, being a bit of a, not an iffy bottling, but you know, I mean, I always used to think that like 15 is your point for Springbank. Really needs to be 15 years old, a little bit more sherry cask than the 10-year-old, and that was kind of, to me, that was kind of like the classic Springbank. But over the years, I've really warmed to the 10-year-old. So, but anyway, kind of coming back to the 25-year-old. Yes, bloody expensive. I know that, but oh, that's good. Okay, so time for a bit of peat. A bit of peat, and let's see what the nose gives us. It still amazes me how few people tend to go for Longrow. I mean, I'm always kind of saying, look, you want a peated malt? You've done Lafroig, you've done Ardbeg, you've done, and they go, I've never heard of Longrow, and you should. It is sensational stuff. Considering this is only 40% American oak, the American oak is very much there and very dominating, which no, I've not got a problem with. Again, the sherry is very subtle. It's giving it a little bit of grittiness to it. It's quite oily, fishy, very fishy, and the peat is just wonderfully soft and smoky. But again, it's got that edge. There's a little bit of medicinal note. There's tar. There's a bit of rope, violets. I mean, I've always loved Longrow. Even going back to the days of the old 10-year-old when you used to get the American oak version and the sherry cask version. The American oak version was just one that I just absolutely loved. And even the no age statement Longrow is really quite impressive. But this is stunning. I mean, yes, it's not cheap. I know it's what, 90 something odd quid. But again, part of the course for an 18-year-old whiskey, but oh, stunning. I just love all that kind of fishiness and that sort of like, you know, dry sort of dusty peat. There's even some Campbelltown maltiness. There's loads of salt. It's just, it's not primal. That's primal, the red, but this is just wonderful. Absolutely stunning. Let's give the palate a go. really fishy and briny, dusty peat. Again, the American oak seems to be the dominating factor. It's got that slight sawdusty note, that lovely maturity, the sherry just adding just a little bit of grittiness to it. Wonderful dusty peat, a little bit of medicinal note, but again, like I said, really fishy, oily cod liver oil, malt, mouth filling, intense, gently spiced, salty. Oh, oh, that is good. And finally, we're moving on to the 13-year-old, the red. Let's see what those gives us on this end, shall we? Now that is a nose. Where do you start with that? Primal, oozing kind of tarry peat. Big, chunky, malty red and black fruits. Touch of medicinal herbalness. A little bit of American oak kind of comes. There's a touch of creaminess to it. Salt. Spices. It's a real big, chunky, intense, gritty, tarry. It's just one hell of a nose. I mean, that is just the sort of nose you just want to keep sniffing and sniffing, because it's just so appealing. I mean, you know, wine, peat. You think on paper they shouldn't work, but they just do so well. I mean, you know, the classic one, the Ben Ryack Solstice, you know, heavy peat, heavy port. I mean, this is not quite as heavy on either of those two counts, but it's just really primal. Let's see what the nose gives us then, shall we? Oh wow, that finish. Oh, spices and dark chocolate and coffee and big winey fruit and salt and oof, my god, that's one hell of a finish. But it starts off quite softly in actual fact. You certainly get the American oak influence, sort of slightly winey fruits in there. It just keeps building and building and building, and that finish is just, whoa, the spices are just kind of tingling on the tongue. I mean, that is just, whoa. Chuck in a load of salt as well, and wow, that is one hell of a finish. I mean, that is intense. Primal is the only word that just really sort of sums it up. I mean, that is just incredibly good. I don't really think it. I mean, what was it bottled at? 51.3. Doesn't need any water. I think if you put any water with it, then you're really going to lose the kind of, you know, intensity of the spirit, and you really want that intensity. That is incredible. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. Like I said, once again, a really big thank you to Springbank, and a big thank you to Grant for the samples for today's episode of the show. A really fitting tasting for World Whisky Day, I think. Hazelburn, like I said, I mean, for a triple distilled spirit, it's got so much character, so much depth, and it is really robust and really interesting. And yeah, I love it. I mean, the Barolo, I think, is just underappreciated. I mean, people just don't seem to buy Hazelburn. Well, they probably do, but not quite so much as they buy Springbank, obviously. And, you know, really should do, in my opinion. The 13-year-old sherry, again, like the Barolo, really balanced. it's not too OTT on the cask finishing, or the cask maturation in the case of the 13-year-old. and like I said, the spirit just has the kind of guts to stand up to sherry casks and all that kind of stuff. Springbank 21, absolutely gorgeous. I must admit, I mean, I've got some of the previous 21 still in stock, I think 1 or 2 bottles. And I kind of was umming and ahhing as to whether to kind of get it in, and then I tasted it and thought, that's just too bloody good not to have on the shelf. That is really very, very good. All those different cask types. I mean, like I said, I didn't really get an awful lot from the rum, it has to be said. But I certainly got the American oak, I certainly got the sherry, and I certainly got a little bit from the port. So, yeah, all really nicely balanced. And likewise with the 25, just superbly balanced, stunning, lovely old Springbank. You know, they could have gone too much with the port on that one, but again, balance was just absolutely spot on. And the Longrow 18, I just love old Longrow. I mean, it's just one of those kind of quirky whiskies that more people should know about and more people should buy, in my personal opinion, because it is just bloody good. And the 13, the red, well, you know, and people do buy that. I mean, just kind of go boom on the shelves and gone within a couple of days, and I can understand why. I mean, that is just a fantastic whiskey. It's primal, it's intense, and it's just got buckets and buckets and buckets of character. And these days of kind of maybe slightly homogenous whiskies and all that kind of stuff, Springbank really stands out for its character, and well, yeah, you can't ask more than that really at the end of the day. Certainly to me, Springbank tastes like absolutely no other distillery at all in Scotland or anywhere else in the world. It is just absolutely fabulously unique, and let's hope it carries on in its own little way. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the show. I hope this will convince you to give both Longrow and Hazelburn a shot, if that's kind of they kind of tick your kind of boxes, so to speak. But until then, I've got a little drop of 25 left in my glass. Happy days.